Welcome to EconWorks. We live in an era of massive platforms, global supply chains, and unprecedented market concentration. But behind every headline about a merger or a legal settlement, there is a deeper mechanical struggle for control. On this show, we pull back the curtain on the invisible forces shaping our economy. We look past the talking points to examine where law, power, and markets actually collide, and how those collisions redefine the world we live in. Coming to you from the EconWorks desk, we're diving into a breakdown of the systems that run our modern lives. This is EconWorks. Today, we have Episode 3 of the AI v. Judge series, the handbag merger that sparked debate. AI critiques FTC v. Tapestry.
An $8.5 billion mega merger between the world's biggest handbag brands was just killed in federal court.
Yeah, totally shut down.
Right. But, the most fascinating part of this trial wasn't really the human lawyers. And it wasn't the thousands of pages of dense economic data either.
Yeah, it was an experiment running quietly in the background. Researchers basically asked, could an artificial intelligence have dismantled the government's entire economic case completely on its own?
Which is just a wild premise.
It really is. I mean, we are looking at the ultimate stress test for AI in high-stakes professional environments. Today's source material is this detailed experiment from a series called AI Critique in Antitrust. And the researchers took the FTC's legal challenge against the recently abandoned merger between Tapestries. They're the parent company of Coach and Kate Spade and Capri Holdings, who owns Michael Kors.
Right, huge brands.
Massive. And they used AI to hunt for the invisible vulnerabilities in the expert economic reports from that case.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you have ever, stared at a 100-page competitor analysis or some dense financial proposal and you're just wondering where the hidden holes are, this deep dive is going to fundamentally change how you work.
Exactly. We're going to break down the exact prompting mechanisms researchers use to turn an AI into this, ruthless economic interrogator.
I love that, a ruthless interrogator. But before we get to the AI, we have to establish the battlefield here.
Right. In antitrust law, the entire case usually hinges on one single concept, which is market definition.
Yeah, you can't prove a company is an illegal monopoly until you define the specific arena that they actually compete in.
Exactly. And the defense Tapestry and Capri, they naturally wanted that arena defined as broadly as humanly possible.
Right. They argued that they compete against literally every handbag sold on the planet, from a $20 canvas tote bag you buy at a grocery store all the way up to a $10,000 Birkin bag.
Because if you define the market as all bags everywhere, then merging Coach and Michael Kors just creates a tiny drop in this massive ocean. It doesn't look like a monopoly at all.
Exactly. But the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, pushed back with a much narrower definition. They claimed the relevant market was exclusively this specific tier they called accessible luxury.
Which is such an interesting phrase.
I find this concept so fascinating because it perfectly matches how consumers actually shop. I mean, it's like going out to eat.
Oh, the restaurant analogy. Yeah, explain that.
So Coach and Michael Kors are like your premium steakhouses. You dress up, you spend a couple $100s. It's a treat.
Right.
It is fundamentally distinct from pulling into a fast food drive-thru for a burger, which is the mass market, but it's also nowhere near $1,000 per plate Michelin star tasting menu, which is your ultra-luxury Chanel or Hermes tier.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The FTC was arguing that this premium steakhouse tier, this accessible luxury, is its own completely isolated ecosystem.
What's fascinating here is that the FTC's economic experts actually explicitly referred to this as the Goldilocks segment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not too cheap, not too expensive.
Exactly. It's a very intuitive idea. But, intuition doesn't hold up in federal court. You have to actually prove the boundaries of that market using hard quantitative evidence.
And to do that, the FTC relied heavily on an economic framework called the hypothetical monopolist test, or the HMT.
Right. The HMT tests market boundaries by asking a very specific question. What would happen if one single entity owned all the brands inside that Goldilocks segment?
Okay, so if one mega corporation owned Coach, Kate Spade, and Michael Kors.
Yes. Could that hypothetical monopoly implement what economists call a SSNIP?
Gotta love government acronyms.
Right. It stands for a small but significant and non-transitory increase in price. Usually, we are talking about a permanent 5 to 10% price hike.
Okay, so the mechanism here is pretty straightforward. If our hypothetical monopolist raises prices by 5% across all those accessible luxury bags, what do the consumers actually do?
Exactly. Do they get frustrated and trade down to mass market brands? Or do they say, forget it, and trade up to ultra luxury?
Right, because if enough people leave the category entirely, the price hike becomes unprofitable, meaning the accessible luxury market isn't a real isolated thing. People will just go elsewhere.
Spot on. But if the customers just swallow the price hike, or if they just bounce around between Coach and Kors because they feel they have no other options in that specific price tier, then the FTC has mathematically proven that the accessible luxury market is real.
And the math they use to determine this is built entirely on the gross margins of the products themselves, which, for these accessible luxury bags, the gross margin is remarkably high.
Extremely high. It usually hovers around 60%.
Wow, 60%.
Yeah. And because that margin is so high, the mathematical tolerance for losing customers during a price hike is actually quite narrow.
Interesting.
The FTC's expert analysis determined that with a 5% price increase, the critical loss threshold was only about 7.7%.
Meaning, the monopoly can only afford to lose 7.7% of its total sales volume before that 5% price hike starts losing them money overall.
Exactly. And to prove they wouldn't lose those customers, the FTC had to calculate something called the aggregate diversion ratio.
Okay, and think of the aggregate diversion ratio as a measure of captive audience behavior. It's just like streaming services.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect way to look at it.
Right. So if Netflix raises its monthly subscription by $2, the diversion ratio asks, do you cancel all your streaming services and just go read a book, meaning you leave the market entirely?
Right.
Or do you just say, well, I'll subscribe to Hulu instead? So you're diverting your money to a direct competitor inside the exact same ecosystem.
That is the perfect analogy.
Mhm.
So the FTC calculated that for the hypothetical monopolist test to pass, the aggregate diversion ratio, the percentage of people switching to a sibling brand within the accessible luxury tier, it needed to be higher than 17%.
Okay, 17% is the magic number.
Yep. And the FTC brought consumer survey data to court, claiming the actual diversion ratio was well above that 17% threshold. So they cleared the bar easily.
Wow.
They even added this really complex merger simulation, projecting the consolidation would cause around $365 million in consumer harm annually, just due to inevitable price hikes.
Okay, so at this point, the FTC's argument looks incredibly robust. I mean, they have an intuitive market definition backed up by quantitative survey data and a sophisticated economic simulation projecting massive harm.
Yeah, it looks bulletproof on paper.
But here is where the AI experiment gets really fascinating. Because I read the source material, and I immediately felt some skepticism about their diversion data.
The surveys.
Yeah. The FTC rested an $8.5 billion argument heavily on consumer surveys. And we know from behavioral economics that stated preference surveys are notoriously unreliable.
Oh, completely.
Like, if a surveyor asks you what you would do if your favorite handbag cost $20 more, your hypothetical answer is going to be very different than your actual behavior when you're standing at the cash register with your credit card.
Right. It's very easy to say I'd never buy it again on a survey.
Exactly. And that gap between stated intention and actual economic behavior is precisely what the researchers wanted to test with the AI.
So they didn't just ask the AI for a summary of the report. They fed the public FTC expert report into the system and forced it into the persona of an adversarial economist.
A completely objective critic.
Right. And then they compared the AI's independent critique against the final 169-page ruling from the real judge to see if the AI's findings actually aligned with reality.
And the AI actually gave the FTC credit for a few things first, which I thought was interesting. It praised the government for using actual diversion data from the merging party's own internal files.
Right. It wasn't just blindly attacking.
No, it was nuanced. It also commended the FTC for pairing the complex math with qualitative evidence, what the source refers to as brown shoe indicators.
Yes, brown shoe. That's a reference to a landmark 1962 Supreme Court antitrust case.
Right.
It basically established the legal precedent that you can define a market not just with raw math, but by looking at practical industry realities. things like distinct pricing tiers, the specific materials used, and how the industry itself recognizes certain brands.
Okay, so the AI recognized that combining those qualitative brown shoe indicators with the quantitative HMT math is standard, rigorous methodology.
Yes, it acknowledged the methodology was sound, but then it completely tore apart the underlying data fed into that methodology.
And I want to highlight one of the most brilliant catches the AI made regarding data selection bias. The AI flagged a massive issue with how wholesale and retail data were being weighted in the FTC's models.
The structural logic of the AI's critique here is just super impressive because it recognized that a wholesale transaction like, say, Coach selling inventory in bulk to a department store like Macy's that involves massive structural discounting.
Right.
But a retail transaction selling directly to a consumer in a boutique does not have that discounting.
Right. So if an economic model blurs those two totally different types of transactions together without properly weighting them, the resulting diversion ratio gets artificially inflated.
Exactly. And the AI caught that discrepancy just from reading the methodology of the report.
Which is incredible. It also zeroed in on my exact skepticism regarding the surveys. The AI identified the risk of survey bias, noting that the data driving that well above 17% diversion rate likely relied on consideration surveys.
Yeah, and a consideration survey simply asks a consumer to list other brands they like.
Right. The AI correctly argued that just liking another brand is entirely different from a price-induced diversion, meaning you actually switch brands because of a 5% price increase.
It's a huge logical leap. And the AI didn't stop at the market definition either. It went right after that $365 million consumer harm projection.
Oh, yeah.
So the FTC used a merger simulation to arrive at that huge number. And the AI pointed out that these simulations routinely rely on an assumption of constant margins.
Meaning the model assumes the cost to manufacture the goods and the profit margins will stay exactly the same after the two companies merge.
Which makes no sense, right? Assuming constant margins in a massive corporate merger completely ignores the fundamental reality of business synergies.
Exactly. If Tapestry and Capri combine, they are absolutely going to consolidate their supply chains. They'll merge their logistics networks. They'll eliminate redundant corporate overhead, fire middle managers, whatever.
Right. By lowering their operational costs, the merged company could actually increase its profit margins without raising the price on the consumer at all.
And the AI recognized that a model ignoring basic merger efficiencies is fundamentally flawed.
Now, to get an AI to produce this level of surgical, highly technical critique, the researchers had to utilize advanced prompt engineering.
Yes, and this is where the real value lies for anyone listening trying to analyze complex documents. You cannot just give an AI a dense report and use a generic prompt like, hey, analyze this and tell me if it's good.
If you do that, you just get a polite, sanitized summary of the table of contents. It's useless.
Totally. The source material outlines how the researchers gave the AI very specific mechanism-driven jobs. Like, they prompted it to run a sensitivity analysis.
And a sensitivity analysis forces the AI to actively play with the underlying math. So the researchers prompted the AI by asking, what happens to the result of the hypothetical monopolist test if the actual diversion ratio was only 12% instead of 17%?
Right. You force the AI to test the fragility of the conclusion. If changing one single survey variable by 5% causes the entire legal argument to collapse, the AI will highlight that variable as the critical pressure point.
Exactly. They also prompted the AI to check the report's assumptions against industry standards by explicitly instructing it to check the merger simulation assumptions against standard antitrust best practices. The AI was able to flag that constant margin issue we just discussed.
You are giving the AI a comparative framework to push against, rather than just letting it accept the text at face value.
Right.
This really is a masterclass in how to use AI for your own work. I mean, if you receive a beautifully formatted strategic proposal filled with confident charts and bold projections, you should turn the AI into an active interrogator.
Ask it the hard questions.
Prompt it to identify which 3 variables the entire proposal hinges on, and then ask it to run a sensitivity analysis on those specific variables. Ask it what data is conspicuously missing from the methodology.
And using those exact prompting techniques, the AI successfully dismantled the FTC's public economic arguments. It found the survey bias, the whole field data discrepancies, and the flawed constant margin assumptions. It practically validated the exact arguments the defense lawyers were making in court.
So the AI tore the FTC's report apart and proved the math was resting on a highly fragile foundation. The defense argued these exact points to the judge. But And here's the major twist in the narrative. Despite the AI finding all of these incredibly valid vulnerabilities, the FTC actually won the case.
Yeah. Following a grueling 7-day evidentiary hearing in September 2024, the federal district court issued a massive 169-page opinion on October 24th. And the judge granted the FTC's motion for a preliminary injunction, effectively blocking the deal.
And less than a month later, on November 14th, Tapestry and Capri officially threw in the towel and just abandoned the $8.5 billion merger.
Completely walked away.
So the mathematical flaws were real, the surveys were biased, the AI proved it. Wait, the AI proved it, yet the government still won?
Well, the explanation lies in the strict limitation of the AI's perspective during the experiment. The AI's critique was entirely ex ante,
Right.
meaning it was operating solely on publicly available expert report summaries, public data sets, and standard economic principles. The judge, however, was not limited to public data.
No, the court had access to millions of pages of sealed internal ordinary course business documents from the companies themselves.
Exactly. The hidden emails, the internal strategy decks, the unredacted Slack messages. The AI couldn't see any of that.
And those internal documents served as the definitive smoking gun. The defense stood in court and argued that accessible luxury was just this hypothetical construct invented by government lawyers. But the judge reviewed their own internal files and saw that Tapestry and Capri executives actively used the exact phrase, accessible luxury, in their daily communications.
Which is pretty damning.
Oh, completely. And they weren't just using the phrase casually, they were actively structuring their businesses around it. The source details how the companies obsessively monitored each other's prices within that specific market tier.
Right. If Michael Kors dropped the price of a tote bag, Coach executives were immediately tracking it and adjusting their own strategies.
They viewed those three brands as direct, primary competitors isolated from the rest of the handbag market.
And the court determined that this documented, real-world corporate behavior provided overwhelmingly strong qualitative support for the FTC's argument. It stabilized the shaky quantitative data.
So the internal documents proved that the high diversion ratios weren't just hypothetical survey artifacts. They were an accurate reflection of how these companies actually operated day to day.
Exactly. The hidden reality filled in the gaps that the public math couldn't secure on its own. Which, brings us to the ultimate question of the experiment. If the AI said the argument was mathematically flawed, but the FTC won anyway based on hidden evidence, does that mean the AI failed?
So what does this all mean? Did the AI get it wrong?
Well, the alignment test, which was the final step, where researchers compared the AI's critique to the judge's 169-page ruling, proves the AI was actually incredibly successful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the AI didn't fail at all. It correctly identified the exact assumptions that required further investigation.
Ah, I see. It acted as the ultimate first-pass interrogator. It looked at the public data and essentially flagged the foundations as unstable.
Exactly. The AI told the researchers, hey, this survey data is weak and the wholesale weighting is suspicious. And the judge completely agreed those foundations were unstable, which is exactly why the court had to rely so heavily on the sealed internal documents to make the final ruling.
The experiment demonstrates that AI, when prompted correctly, is just an unmatched tool for finding the critical open questions. It highlights exactly where human analysts need to focus their discovery requests and where the actual vulnerabilities in an argument lie.
But it also reaffirms that final definitive judgments still require the full evidentiary record, the messy human reality of live testimony and internal communications that algorithms just cannot extrapolate from public data alone.
Right, so the core takeaway here for you, the listener, is really about augmenting your own analytical capabilities. AI is not going to replace human judgment, and it obviously cannot magically read the internal emails of your competitors to give you perfect certainty.
Not yet, anyway.
Right, but by utilizing sensitivity analysis prompts and forcing the system to challenge structural assumptions, you turn AI into a tool that perfectly highlights where you need to start digging. It removes the intimidation factor from massive, dense, technical information.
It does. And, this does leave us with a really profound final thought regarding the future of this technology.
Ooh, what's that?
Well, in this experiment, the AI was restricted to public documents and successfully dismantled the economic models from the outside. But corporate landscapes are rapidly shifting toward deploying internal, hypersecure AI agents that do have access to all those private, ordinary course business documents.
Oh, wow. Internal AIs that process every single email, every pricing deck, and every strategic memo in real time.
Exactly. If an internal AI can analyze standard economic frameworks while simultaneously cross-referencing a company's own hidden qualitative data, the implications for litigation are just staggering.
I mean, could an internal AI predict the exact vulnerabilities of a massive merger before the paperwork is even drafted?
That's the question. We may be entering an era where AI doesn't just critique the lawsuit after the fact, but accurately predicts the judge's exact ruling before the deal is even announced to the public.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Econ Works. The goal of this series is to move beyond the surface-level descriptions of how markets work and start looking at the actual architecture of competition. We'll be back soon with another look at where the law and economics meet the market. For the full technical analysis and more from this series, visit us at econworks.com. If you found today's breakdown valuable, please subscribe and share the show. It helps us keep the analysis independent. From all of us here at Econ Works, thanks for listening.